All right, guys, welcome back. Matthew Iommi, founder of Fetii. Are you the only founder, or are there any co-founders?
No, co-founder. Me and
Nice.
and my friend Justin Rath. I've known him since high school, so we've been on this journey for a while. So
Wow.
yeah.
Good for you guys. What's it like starting a business with a friend? I've done it before. It can be great or can be horrible.
Yeah. Whether it's a friend or not, I mean, it's two humans, so it's and humans are complicated, right? So I think you really do need to find someone who is down to go through those struggles of building a business. And if you've got some history behind that, I think it does make it stronger. You can't just start it with, hey, you're my best friend, let's start a business. There's a lot of things that Justin is exceptional at that made it make sense. Yeah.
And so, okay, that brings up a good question I have, because a lot of people think that. They go, oh, well, you like clothes and I like clothes. Let's start a clothing brand.
Yeah.
Or like, you like working out and I like, let's start a gym together. That's a bad decision in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
How did you always think that you would start something with this guy, or did it just kind of happen?
No, I did. As you kind of go through this, you can say entrepreneurial journey, but just a journey of like trying to build something, you gravitate towards others who also have that kind of passion. And so before Fetii, I mean, we had worked on a couple things, some together, some separately. It was always kind of that thing, like he would say, hey, I've got this idea I'm working on. I'd be like, hey, how can I help? I've got this idea I'm working on. Let's bring it. It was always just back and forth, just trying to nail down something.
Interesting. So you guys are both serial entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say successful. Like, hey,
that's fine. Usually it's like, what's the statistic? It's like the average billionaire, it's like their 7th business.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So
what number is this for you?
This would probably, I mean, it's like, what do you call a previous business? Like something that, you made a website for or something.
Lemonade stand, does that count?
What was that?
Does
yeah,
lemonade stand count?
Yeah, in my eyes. I would probably, let's see. I'd probably say this is the third or fourth legitimate idea. And then unfortunately this one has taken off. So
it's what it takes, dude. A lot of people think it's supposed to be the first one. I think it's like any entrepreneurship is a sport, right? You're not going to be good at it at the beginning. Or relationships, right? Like people, you're not going to find the one, and at least most people don't, one in their first relationship. Like, how many long-term relationships do you have before you find the one you marry? Usually 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with business, in my opinion.
And the thing is too, is like, even though those other ones weren't successful, you learn something each time. And I think that's probably the biggest, in terms of just like overall advice or reasons why I've found some sort of success. Obviously we're still building and still trying to make it into a huge success. But while we found good traction, I think is just consistently learning is the biggest thing. And from the failures, it's like a thing. It's so I'll tell you an interesting story that I read. It was this private equity firm. Forget the name, but their whole strategy was, look, we're going to raise a lot of capital and we're going to buy all these businesses from, small mom and pop shop businesses. And what we'll do is we'll hire a whole bunch of MBA, men who went to the best business schools, Harvard or, whatever school you want to put in there. And they'll run these businesses, grow them, build them up, and it'll be successful. And what they quickly realized is, they had probably a 4% success rate from buying that mom and pop business into scaling it and growing and making it successful. It really didn't work out well because it's hard to just learn in a classroom how to build a business, how to go through the ups and downs and all that stuff. And so I think the biggest thing is kind of just getting out there, trying different things and learning that way.
Well, not only that, but the first thing that I thought about when you said mom and pop businesses, not that those aren't great businesses, but you can really only scale those so far. A pizza shop, a appliance store, even a nail salon. Like, sure, you can open up additional locations and you can try and maximize profits and grow and duplicate the system, but like there's not a ton of growth potential. And if you're dealing with a success rate of like 10% or lower, you need to have businesses that can 10x in order just to break even.
Well, look, I'll push back on that a little bit because I mean, the way Fetii started, let me give a rundown.
Yeah,
of
what is
Fetii
Fetii for everyone who hasn't had the privilege to take one?
Yeah,
yet, 'cause they're
definitely.
awesome.
So Fetii is a group rideshare app. Essentially, we're doing to the charter transportation industry what Uber did to the taxi industry. We're taking these high capacity vehicles, primarily these 15 passenger transit and sprinter vans, and incorporating rideshare technology into them so that groups, whether you're going to nightlife areas, concerts, festivals, sporting events, lake trips, bachelorette parties, anything like that, you can get a high capacity vehicle where everyone can ride together with the same ease and convenience and accessibility as an Uber or Lyft. And so that's kind of where we've started. It's grown, it's scaled. We're in 68 cities, 6 states. We transport about 200,000 passengers a month. And the reason I was going to say push back is because when it started just with one party bus company, one party bus vehicle when I was in college. So and that would have been considered a mom and pop shop, right?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
So I think it's maybe kind of that mental shift of saying, hey, I don't want to be a mom and pop shop. How do I get this into everyone's hands? And I wonder how many success stories started with kind of that type of mentality where you would think, for example, you mentioned like a pizza place. And it might be a bad example. I'm not sure if they're still around, but there was this app called Slice.
Was that like a pizza truck that would like make them on demand?
Yeah. Different. They had raised
sounded
a lot.
Like a great idea.
It sounded like a great idea, but that's an example of how, hey, maybe they were thinking, and I think they were young entrepreneurs. I can't really remember, but that's an example of hey, even though it might seem like this is a small idea, oftentimes, especially with technology and the access we have to that nowadays, a lot of these industries, while you would think they're mom and pop shops, can become huge.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe Airbnb that started off with just, hey, I'm renting out a room.
Yeah.
To get some people in, and now look at them now.
That's valid. Also, one thing I want to point out that for everyone who's listening and once again hasn't had the privilege to use a Fetii yet or ride with Fetii, I think the coolest part about your system is you take away the stress of the person who called the ride. One of the worst things ever, especially in college, is calling an Uber for your friends, expecting them to get you back for it. I mean, I would say like in an ideal world, one person just covers it each time and they make it fair. But a lot of times you'll have one person, everyone's like kind of holding back from calling one because they don't want to have to pay. They know it's going to be tough. You're going to have to act like a dick to get your money back. That sucks, right? And when you're a broke college student, that's definitely uncomfortable. And, I remember the first time I used Fetii, it's like, hey, everyone has to tap right here and pay before you even get to take off.
Yeah. So the way Fetii works is somebody will call it just like an Uber, but they won't actually pay for it yet. Once that Fetii vehicle shows up, there's a QR code on the vehicle plus on the driver's app that each person getting on will scan, and it separates the fare individually. So we kind of say you book it like an Uber and Lyft, but you pay like a Lyman Bird, those scooters. And that's a good point you bring up, and it goes back to kind of what I started with, where you're constantly learning. And so whenever we came up with Fetii, we didn't say, okay, we're going to make an app. This is how the model is going to work. This is how the supply is going to work. Payment system is going to work like this. It didn't just come all at once. The reason we added that kind of structure in terms of payment processing and that check-in system is because we actually ran into the problem, right? You're bringing up that problem of Uber where one person has to front $20, right? Imagine with a larger vehicle where it's more expensive. You think a college student is going to put up front $100, $200 and hope they get paid back from all 10, 11, 12, 13 people. It just wouldn't work.
That makes sense.
Right? So we ran into that problem and we were trying all different strategies. We said, hey, well, why don't we, and that's also whenever the vehicle comes, we don't know how many people are going to be in that group. So we were thinking, hey, let's get the booker's payment information, but we won't actually charge the card until the driver tells us how many passengers there are. So we tried that out, but we ran into that same problem where it's like, oh, you need my credit card. I don't know if I want to do that and then risk it. And to your point, try and get paid back. And so tried a lot of different things. And then we came to that QR system. And that's kind of what worked out and nailed it. And that's a cool story right there with that. when I was in college, I want to say it was going into my junior year, I did a study abroad in China. So I was in Beijing.
Wow.
Yeah, I was in Beijing for 5 weeks.
That's a little out of the ordinary. Usually it's like Spain or Amsterdam or Italy.
Well, that was during the time. That was around Trump's first term. And so there was a lot of, trade war stuff and just an emphasis on China's economic rise. And
do you speak any Mandarin?
Barely. You got Lao Shi, which is teacher, Yi San 1 2 3, but I did not pick up a lot. So whenever I was in China, it was fascinating because it's really interesting where a lot of the stuff that's going on there, just the way their system is set up for, I guess, citizen control, population control, you really don't know too much of what's going on over there, right? Other than what maybe they want you to know. So anyways, I go over there. I'm there for 5 weeks, and there's this app called, have you ever heard of WeChat?
Yeah. Haven't used it, but I haven't heard, but I've heard of it.
Have you used it? I don't even know if.
No, I haven't used it.
Yeah,
It sounds familiar. I feel like maybe one of my suppliers over there has said I only communicate through WeChat.
Oh, trust me. So I don't even know if you can use it in the States or outside of China, but in China, everyone uses it. And it's this app where you can do, it has social media component. It has a chat component, to your point. And it has a payment component. It's essentially kind of this all-inclusive app that everyone uses. And so what was interesting, and this was before COVID, after COVID, everyone and their mom started using QR codes. You saw it in restaurants, you saw it everywhere, right? A lot of people forget that before COVID, QR codes weren't that big of a thing. I mean, the biggest thing was probably
I feel like it was kind of like the more nerdy types who would be like, use this QR code.
Yeah,
yeah,
it
sure,
definitely
bro.
wasn't cool. Yeah, exactly.
It definitely wasn't common.
But in China, you would connect your payment information to WeChat, and whenever you wanted to go buy something, in China, whether it's a small thing at the train station or a small restaurant, anywhere to big purchases, on the WeChat app, you would scan the vendor's QR code, and you would just pay that way. And I think that was a big inspiration of when we came back. It was like, hey, this works so seamlessly in China. There has to be something more to it. How can we incorporate it? And that gave a lot of inspiration to kind of how we do that payment structure. But to your point, yeah, it was so many different things of like, hey, why doesn't this charter industry kind of, it's so outdated. What are good ways to make it more accessible and more convenient for people to utilize? Because it's like, hey, the best option prior to Fetii, and this is what I tell investors and people when they want to kind of hear the pitch. It's like, look, before Fetii, there were 2 options for groups. Once you hit, and I'm saying group, I'd probably say like 7 and up. You had 2 options. The first one was to reserve a charter vehicle days or weeks in advance, pay a 3 to 5 hour minimum for maybe a 15-minute trip, right? Yeah. And have no payment flexibility where everyone put it, to your point, down deposit, pay an arm and a leg just to be able to ride together. And so around 2012, 2013, with the rise of rideshare, Uber and Lyft was getting a lot of traction then, we saw that groups, and obviously this is all hindsight after doing research and understanding the industry more, we saw that groups, instead of riding together and doing that whole difficult process, they were just going to split up, take 2, 3, 4 Ubers, Lyfts, personal vehicles, and get there to where they need to go. And so it's like, hey, well, we started this in middle of 2019. It's like, hey, it's 2019. There has to be a better way. And that's kind of where we started brainstorming and trying to think of ways to really expand this and make this a viable kind of solution for groups.
And what was that? What were those early days like? Was it like posting flyers? Were you just saying, I'll drive were you DDing for everyone? And then you're like, trying to make some money on the side to get the money to start the app?
Yeah. So it started off with 1 vehicle. I was driving it every weekend. This was my senior year at A&M. I went to Texas A&M, College Station, and I was driving it every weekend, basically just transporting a lot of people to the bar area, a lot of frats, sororities, date events, parties, different things like that, pre-games, birthday parties. We were taking just $5 per person cash. You text a number. It was super archaic, super manual.
Nice. That should be in the beginning.
Yeah, and And just from driving it, just from understanding the users' kind of pain points, what needed to work, Justin and I and the team at that point just started making iterations, adding. First, we started with a website, a booking system, a schedule system, so everything just wasn't text. Marketing, to your point, just going out to student housing, putting up flyers, doing some Instagram ads, different things like that, and just trying to boots on the ground, just scaling it.
A question I have is, it's not always black and white like this, but I come across a lot of people who are either like, I bootstrap everything, or they're big raising guys. I have an idea, let's go raise some money. Okay, before, like, just like to prove the concept.
Yeah.
Would you say you fall into either bucket, or what kind of got you to the point where you felt like I need to go raise capital?
Yeah. So I, like I said, I like to learn a lot. So I was always in the news looking at startups. So I kind of had somewhat of an idea of kind of the fundraising and how to go about that.
So you understood the environment.
I understood the environment. With that being said, I hadn't had a successful business under my belt. I wasn't at one of these, I love A&M, but it wasn't like a Harvard or a Stanford or anything like that. And so while initially, and so at the beginning, bootstrapped everything. I mean, we got credit cards, we got loans. Funny story, one of those credit cards still paying off from the early days. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I could, and that's probably bad financial management on my end. I could just pay it off all now, but it's like,
I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, put the money, if you got time to pay it off and the money you could make is greater than the interest on that, why?
Yeah, exactly. But everything was bootstrapped, and the reason being isn't because like, hey, I think it's smarter to bootstrap things first and then I wasn't thinking anything like that. The reality was we couldn't raise for, are we allowed to cuss on this?
Yeah.
We couldn't raise for shit.
Really?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this was kind of at a point in rideshare where investors and everyone believed that Uber and Lyft had kind of come out of the trenches and they were the market leaders, and anybody else trying to come into it didn't stand a chance. This was also when Uber, either they had just turned profitable or still weren't profitable. And so a lot of investors and the sentiment around rideshare was like, hey, we don't even know if this can be a profitable industry. And they were burning significant cash and everything. So, I mean, a funny story is, whenever it really took off in College Station and we launched the app, it was taken off. We felt like we had a good kind of foundation on the business. We first went to Austin. We started pitching VCs and no one would bite.
How many?
We drove around and like sent, like dropped off packages to venture, to like all the top venture firms in Austin. It was probably like 15, 20.
Oh, that's not that many.
Yeah.
It's not that many no's. I got 60 no's maybe.
Yeah. And
Canva founder got 100.
Really? Yeah. I mean, and that's not kind of like the emails. That's just going around. So the emails are another thing. Anyways, I was so new and naive to it, where finally one said, "Hey, we'll meet with you." And I'm telling Justin like, "Hey, we got this meeting. We got the money. Like, it's secured." Like,
that's how you feel always in the beginning.
I know
they really liked us, bro.
Yeah, I know. And then you learn down the road that's just the business.
Yeah,
Anyways, we take this meeting. It did not go well. And quickly we realized, hey, this is going to be harder than we thought. So we ended up taking some angel investors. That allowed us to kind of prove like product market fit a little bit more. We launched in Austin, started taking off in Austin. That kind of gave more validation, and we ended up raising some more angel funds from there. Once we launched in Austin, we launched in Dallas and Fort Worth, and once we probably got to we launched in Dallas, Fort Worth, Tuscaloosa, and Baton Rouge.
All college towns, yeah.
All college towns. Dallas, Fort Worth, there's a lot to do there. There's the whole metro, but at the beginning, yeah, it was a lot of college towns because that's what we had success in.
And is the college market like a market? Is that a market that produces a lot of opportunity for a lot of startups, you think?
Look, I think a lot of young entrepreneurs have success in the college market. Maybe for the primary reason is that because that's what the market they understand the most.
But
right?
It's also, Mark, I think another great opportunity within the college. Someone made a great point of this to me. They said a lot of people look at the college market as bad because kids are broke and they have lots of distractions. You know, they're partying, they got classes, all this. But it's also a great place to capture customers early on that will grow up with you. And I think that's very valuable.
That's a valuable part. And the other valuable part is that you're going after a base of customers that are very integrated. So if something catches steam within that college market, it can go viral really quickly because everyone's seeing each other all the time. They're all in organizations. They're kind of in this bubble, right? Whereas if you're going after B2B clients, right? Let's say you land a client here. It doesn't
like an NFL game or something like that, transporting people to and from.
The bubble is more limited, and it's a little bit more hard for something to catch fire because sure, you have great success there, and then you have to go repeat it with another B2B client. Whereas if you're able to get in with 50 students in college that love your product, you'd be surprised that week over week exponential growth from them telling their friends and their friends telling their friends, that can grow really quickly, which I assume is one huge aspect of why Facebook in the early days started with college students.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
So yeah.
Alcohol companies start with college students. I mean, it's a great market, I think.
It's good, yeah.
Travel companies, everything. So how many rounds have you guys raised to date?
Yeah. So like I said, we had those angels. I guess you can call that pre-seed. And then we just closed our seed round. So 7.35 million.
What's the total? How much raised total today?
Probably all in all around 8 million.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy raising? Or is this like, fuck, let's get this over with?
Oh yeah.
So I can get to the next part.
No. I mean, once you get to a point where at first, and just being in this space so long, you really understand that no matter how much, like let's say you see, and even for your viewers and listeners who kind of see the big press of our round recently, while I can confidently say we're in a good space, you'll see these huge rounds and then 5 years later they're bankrupt. You know, it really, I would say that, there's a glory aspect to it that's been kind of normalized in the space and in entrepreneurship where you're kind of chasing that round. But at the end of the day, you're giving up pieces of your business, right? So like I said, through a lot of trial and error and learning and to where I am now, it's hard for you to get excited. It's like, yes, I just gave away 5% or I just gave away 10% of my business.
Well, I want to challenge you on that because I have a different perspective. When I first started, that's how I felt. I want to keep as much of the pie as possible. And I'm very lucky to have like some absolutely insane mentors in my life. And the one thing that I've had repeated to me over and over is like, it doesn't matter how fast your first lap is. The only thing that matters is if you finish the race, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So like a lot of people, I've had like, family members of mine and friends like, oh, well, you don't want to, for example, like I gave away, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I just gave away 10% of my company to the founder of the fastest growing clothing and e-commerce brand of all time. Scaled his business from 0 to 250 million in sales in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Hoodies and sweats.
Yeah.
It's like disgusting, unheard of, even in the tech space. And I called, I don't know, 50 people, 50 mentors and friends and advisors. And, 49 of them said, you're an idiot. This is the worst deal I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And then one guy, Albert Mahoney, actually, founder of ProMix, who goes to our gym.
Nice.
He goes, bro, I would take this in a second. He goes, it's all about the story. And at the end of the day, he's like, who gives a fuck if you sell your company one day and you get 40 instead of 50 million?
Yeah.
He's like, you still sold it. He's like, you need to do everything. You need to do everything you can to make that chance of success higher.
For sure.
And so when I first started, I was really protective of the equity. And these days, I'm much more relaxed about it.
That's fair. Yeah. And Well, there's pros and cons to it, right? And so there's a balance. I mean, look, there's a reason we took the money, right? The pros outweighed the cons. And to your point, it's like there's so many things to think about, because let's say you raise a lot of money, you get a lot of press, you build your network, right? So let's say it doesn't work out, you still gained a lot, right?
Yes.
You've got those relationships.
Exactly.
On the flip side, it's like, okay, we raised a lot of money. And because we raised a lot of money, for us to have a successful exit, and I'm not saying this is in our case, I'm saying these companies who raise hundreds of millions, because we raised so much money, and where not only our equity is at, ours as in the founders, but also where the investors' equity is at, now all of a sudden you need to make sure that exit strategy is in the billions. Right? For it to make sense for the investors, for you with the equity you own, to have a really successful outcome where you don't have to worry about money for the rest of your life. Same with your teammates, your employees, right? And now let me ask you the question: is it easier to sell a business for $1 billion, or is it easier to sell a business for $100 million?
To be honest, I have a different view. That's a good question. And I mean, I would say like the obvious answer would probably be 100, but I guess it also depends. But the way I look at it is like, and you kind of touched on that right there. If the business you're working on, you believe is your life mission, like if you're a Zuckerberg and you think like the only thing I'll ever be doing is building Facebook or Meta, that's a different story. But if your intention is to exit, if your intention is to go and create something else, or even multiple things after this, once again, by you giving yourself a greater chance of success with this current venture, even if you get a smaller payday at the end, you're almost guaranteeing that in the long run you get more money. How much more successful can you be on your second venture, both in raising, bringing on top talent, everything, if you have a win on your record? You know what I mean?
I agree. No, you're right. With all that being said, I think a big aspect of it too is being able to raise money in a power of leverage. Right? Because you run into these things where you go, okay, well, we raised a lot of money with all these kind of aspects that you're talking about, but we raised money at a point where we really needed it, right? So the investor who comes in, or the firm or the private equity or whoever it is, let's say you really needed it. Well, not only did they get a whole bunch of equity, but they also got a board control, right? Or they also got high liquidity preferences, which just goes all back to where, I guess it's a balancing act, something that increases the chances of success while decreasing the harms that it could do.
For sure.
Yeah. So it's all a balancing act. We're happy with where we are, and a fortunate thing. Well, and a lot of people say like, look, whenever you're building a business, you would rather have the money to build the business coming from your customers than coming from investors. And if the majority is coming from customers, and then you get the investors, to your point, to support and build it and bring it up, that's obviously the best case scenario.
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, you do have some big investors on your cap table. And actually a couple guests before you was Matt, and he has Mark Cuban as an investor as well. I'm curious how that experience has been.
Yeah. So Mark Cuban led the round of the most recent, the seed round. And that came from exactly to my point of like, at some point your revenues have to, or not your revenue, your users have to advocate for you. And that's kind of what will bring you to success. And so I kind of mentioned in the early days before we had really grown and scaled and become kind of a bigger brand, when we were just reaching out to investors, it was a lot harder to gain interest and all these things. The way the Mark Cuban situation came about is his daughter was a huge Fetii user.
Oh, no way.
And so
that's perfect.
Exactly. And so she reached out. She was a big fan. She had used Fetii a lot in Dallas.
She's a college student, I'm assuming.
She's a college student. I don't want to
we don't
blast her too much on media, but she asked if we could launch in her college city, in her city where she went to college. And she reached out, I think, via Instagram, and you kind of put together you kind of put two and two together. It's like, hey, your last name is Cuban, So I say, hey, look, it's so awesome. You love the product. We would probably have to raise some more before we could launch in your city. And that kind of got the wheels turning. Mark found out about it. And it also turned out that Jason Kidd and some of the Mav staff were also Fetii users.
Nice.
So that helped. And he wanted to get involved. We had a conversation. moved very quickly, and that was a really good experience how he dealt with that, and it was very fair. So he ended up leading the round. He came on board, and then as part of that round is Goodwater Capital. They're a consumer-focused fund. They've had some great successes and great expertise, and then also Y-Combinator, which Y-Combinator has been really good to work with. They're based out of San Fran. For those that aren't familiar, they were the first investors in Airbnb, Instacart, DoorDash, Coinbase, a lot of Cruise, what was Cruise, before they got acquired. But that's been also great validity, aside from the money, validity too. You know, all of a sudden, partnerships are easier, right? Getting other investors are easier because you've kind of got that
stamp of approval
exactly,
in a lot of ways.
Exactly. So we've got some great, fortunately, backers now, but I do want to iterate that, I mean, the first 1, 2, 3 years, all bootstrap, just trying to make it work. And so for anyone trying to build out a business, I would say do what you need to do to kind of get things going first. And it makes things a lot easier versus like, hey, I've got a pitch deck. Here's my idea. Invest in it, because that's just hard.
For sure. I have a question for you, and hopefully this is all settled by the time this episode comes out. I don't think they'd see it anyway, but so we've been raising for a little bit. We're a decent ways in. I've been setting up you could call it a chess game for the last 4 months. Getting every family friend, even family member, to like bring up my name and our business to a specific family office. It's like maybe like one of the most important family offices in the country in the sports and fitness niche. And I finally hopped on a meeting with the father who owns it. And he had already heard a lot about us, and he heard about me, and I told him my story, got super vulnerable. And the son afterwards texted me and was like, yo, like, I'm very excited about this. I think we can make this happen. And he offered me like a big, not like full approval, but he pretty much said, I think I can get you this amount.
Yeah.
But we're going to have to get this percentage. And it's actually quite a bit of a low ball on
the valuation.
To be honest, once again, I don't give a shit about the valuation. Yeah. The only thing that I care about is making sure that this gets to, that we become the next Lululemon, essentially. And this would really, really help with that. But I'm curious, having dealt with a big guy like Mark Cuban, was there a negotiation in between, or was it like, this is my offer, that's it, see ya? And, that's a lot of pressure dealing with someone that powerful who has that much influence, and you're like, I really want to get this deal done, but I also want to try and, get something that's a little more fair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm curious what your stance is on that. How much can you push back against someone like that?
I mean, it's all in negotiation. It's all the leverage that you have. So, I mean, we were profitable at the time. So it's like, look, if you don't want to get involved, that's fine. We're not going anywhere. Right. And so in those early days when I was kind of talking about when we took some angel money and different things like that, we had less leveraging power. So honestly, in my opinion, we got a much better deal out of a big player like Mark Cuban than we did in some of the previous capital that we raised. So I think it's all about leverage. And if you've got a great product and a great story, they're going to see the value in that. And it just gives you just a lot more negotiating power to say, hey, this is how big it can become. We're going to be fine with or without you, but we'd love to have you on. And if they're bought into it, then they'll get into it. Now, obviously, your business better than I do, and there's always different factors to consider. Like, hey, if this family office doesn't go through, do you have any other kind of potential people who could also come in? If you really think they're the only ones who can do what they do, and maybe I don't have many options, or I really need it, then that's where you kind of say, okay, like maybe it's not as good of terms as I wanted, but it makes sense for the business. So it's always just kind of just feeling it out, and that's just one of the parts. Obviously, yeah. Like I said, you're going to know your business more, so it's kind of figuring out what makes sense for it.
Yeah.
All
right, I want to switch topics a little bit of a controversial question. Nothing to do with your business specifically, but how do you feel? I feel like there's a lot of distractions these days for, you could say, young entrepreneurs. And what I mean by that is, if you're young and you want to be successful, do I go start a business, like a real business? Or do I go and start an agency or sell a course or sell an info product or coaching? You know what I mean? I think it can be, if you're a founder, you're pretty much like, if you actually want to be successful, if you want to give yourself the highest chance of success, the truth is you're probably not going to make a lot of money until you sell.
Right. Exactly.
Or maybe like IPO or something, right? That could take 4, 5, 6+ years.
Yeah.
And you're going to be working really hard, and it can be disheartening to some people to be grinding on something and seeing all these other young people their age making hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions a year on like info or agencies. I would call that quick cash. What's your advice on that to like anyone who's young and watching this and might not necessarily know which path to go on?
Yeah, I think, and it might be controversial, but I think you're either the type of person who needs to do it or you're not. I don't think it's one of those things like, hey, I'm trying to figure out my career path. I might be an entrepreneur, or I might go into sales.
Yeah.
Right. It's been glorified so much, kind of this entrepreneurship founder title, that people don't understand just the amount of sacrifice and how hard it is. And there's like this famous interview with Jensen of NVIDIA.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
right?
It's like, hey, if you could go back, what do you do? And it's like, probably, I mean, it's just so hard and it's miserable. And it might not be the best for branding or for just saying it out there, but I mean, there's a lot of misery and sacrifice and things like that. I mean, think about it. In College Station, everyone's graduating. They're going on to these jobs, getting $100,000 salaries out of the gate. And I stayed in College Station for a year, just driving the party bus.
No
right.
way.
And it's one of those things where I wasn't necessarily, oh man, what are people going to think about me? I went to college. They're all out building their careers, and I'm driving a party bus. I think, and to me, I didn't really think that way because there wasn't anything I'd rather do. I wanted to build something. I wanted to kind of. It sounds bad, but I find a lot of attraction in kind of living a big life, and I think you have to make a lot of those sacrifices to kind of be able to do that. And I think entrepreneurship is one avenue to be able to live a big life and have a lot of impact. So
fuck yeah, dude. I'm really glad you brought that up and worded it that way.
Yeah.
The whole I drove the bus while everyone left. I think that's super valuable.
Look, if you have to convince someone or convince yourself to do it, you're probably not going to last long.
Oh yeah.
It has to be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. If it's not this, I'm figuring out another business idea or something, and I'm going to make it work till it works.
Well, I think to be an entrepreneur and to have a good chance of success, like you have to genuinely have fun doing shitty stuff. Like, I don't know about you, I'm assuming it's the same, but I think back to what you could consider like the worst days over the past couple of years, getting cheated on, getting in a big fight with my dad over business and content, thinking I was never going to talk to him again, checking the bank account and like literally thinking it was over.
Yeah.
I think back on those moments and it was actually like, this might be like fucking twisted and weird, but it was like fun. Like I looked in the mirror. Like I remember this one time I checked my bank account.
Yeah.
There was like a $40,000 credit card bill due in 4 days and there was $143 in the account. And I wasn't like sad about that. I screenshotted it and I went in the bathroom and I was like, this is going to be fucking sick to talk about in a couple years. And we made it through. Yeah. And now we're killing it. And I don't know. I think you have to enjoy moments like that and almost think about like, oh, this is a movie that's being made right now. And this is like what do you call it? I forget the word in high school when we talk about stories, the climax of the movie, right? I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I mean, it goes back to kind of like, it's not the best for branding or in terms of talking about entrepreneurship, but honestly, for me, it's kind of just, I guess you get addicted to the grind. You get addicted to learning so much. You get addicted to solving problems. one thing that I probably need to do better at is enjoying the wins.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's like the goalpost is always moving in my experience.
Yeah.
So once kind of we figure out something and have some sort of success, there's always that next goal. So I think that's what's helped me a lot is people say you should live in the present. I'm always living in the future.
I think it's impossible to live in the present and like be a successful entrepreneur.
I think so.
There's always a new obstacle. It's like if you're the captain of the ship, like, you know, you're always looking ahead. You always need to see if there's an island, which would be an opportunity, or a potential ship coming your way to come and sink you.
Yeah. And the thing is, the bigger you get, the bigger the problems get. So that's another thing that people don't talk about. They think, oh, once I raise this money or once I explode in one market, then it's smooth sailing from there. The bigger the issues get, the bigger you get, the bigger the problems get, the more stress that comes. Whenever we started off and I was just driving the bus each weekend, I had a lot more stress than I do now. But again, I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm not, and that's another thing too. When we talk about sacrifice, I say sacrifice in the context of like, oh, well, everyone was going out on the weekends, their senior year, going to the clubs and everything, into the bars and hanging out with friends. And I was literally just driving a bus all weekend until, you know, from 6 p.m. all the way to 3 a.m. Right. But to me, I would have rather been doing that than going out. So was it really a sacrifice? You know, it's sacrifice to some people, but not. And I think that helps you have a lot more success if you don't view it as like, hey, I wish I was at the bars or I wish I was doing this and that. Because for me, I would have rather just kept on trying to build the company.
Well, that's why it's so important to pick something that you're passionate about. I think so many, at least a lot of my friends in college, you know, I talk about this a lot on my socials. Like a lot of people, as soon as they graduate, what do? They pick the highest offer. You get 80K from this job and 110 and 130 from these three, whatever. They pick the highest one because that's what their family says and that's what their peers say. Oh, the best. But you should pick the thing that you're going to enjoy the most because you're literally going to make more money in the long run, but you're going to save more money in the short run because if you're doing something you hate, you're going to buy back your time with drinking, partying, materialistic things. Whereas it sounds like to you, it's like the only thing you wanted to do was drive the bus.
Exactly.
And that's where you get fulfillment from.
And that's why I say, like, you don't really want to have to convince anyone. And that goes from starting their own company to joining the team, to joining Fetii. Because that scenario you mentioned where it's like, hey, I've got a great job that funds my lifestyle. I'll be able to build a family with it. And I can get 1 or 2 vacations a year, this or that, then I'll be able to retire. A lot of people are fine with that. And if anything, more power to them. You saved yourself a lot of headache.
Yeah.
And a lot of stress.
Yeah.
So I don't have any bad viewing towards those routes. I think just each person is different. And if you kind of go the entrepreneurial route, you have to make sure that it's actually what you want to do. To your point, you've got a passion for it. Because if you don't, you're just gonna be miserable.
For sure. Well, on the topic of misery and dealing with hard things, one thing that I wanted to bring up was COVID. Right?
Yeah.
Talk with us through what that experience was like, especially in an industry like yours. That's got to be.
Yeah.
What was it like when where was your company at when the announcement of COVID hit, and what was that like to hear?
So we started the party bus stuff beginning of 2019. Towards the end of 2019, we launched the app, and that's kind of where this kind of new initiative, national rideshare kind of idea and vision came about. From there, like I said, we drove to Austin, stayed there, started pitching VCs. Obviously, they were all saying no, and then we started doing that at the end of 2019, and then March 2020. Things started getting serious with this COVID stuff.
Did you, at that point, at least feel like pretty good about the business? Like, oh, things are happening?
Good enough to where we thought, we're going to make it.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to investors like, hey, users love this product. Like, there's something here.
Yeah.
So we felt good about that. COVID hits, and obviously group transportation, it's non-existent. People will never know if it's going to come back, this or that. So Justin and I, we were scrambling to figure out what we were going to do, how how we were going to make sure that we didn't have to lay off any of our team members. And so we were spitballing ideas. We were like, hey, well, why don't we use kind of this marketplace app that we built and maybe start we were thinking of complete pivots, like, hey, let's do a made on demand business.
Just to keep the lights on.
Yeah. And I mean, frankly, at that point, it's like just to stay in the game.
Yeah.
Right. And so why don't we, people are dealing with germs and COVID. They may be getting, still maid service. Maybe there's something there. Anyways, we were going back and forth, trying to figure out ideas. I was cold emailing people, just trying to see what sticks. I ended up emailing the CIO, Chief Information Officer of the Texas A&M University system. And so that system is above all the campuses. So that's the main Texas A&M College Station. It's Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, Galveston, all those things. And we said, hey, what are you seeing? What are you running into? And his main thing was, hey, the solution we need technology that can help reopen the schools. And so we had a call with him, and we were kind of explaining what we can do and hearing what he needed. And once he said, like, hey, we need something that can reopen the schools, help with contact tracing, this and that, a light popped in my head, and I said, well, look, we've got this technology that whenever users get into a vehicle, they have to scan a QR code. What if we put Fetii QR codes on all of the university classrooms, labs, if you have transportation going on, basically all over the university. And whenever someone enters into that classroom, they'll scan the Fetii QR code using our app. Whenever they exit the classroom, they'll scan that QR code using our app. And let's say you're in that classroom, Lucas, and you get COVID. Well, the university system would be able to go into the back end and look at everyone who was in that room with you when you had COVID, and then send out a push notification to all those people who checked into that classroom at the same time and said, hey, contact tracing purposes.
Oh, interesting.
You have to go get tested because you may have been exposed to the virus.
So you use Fetii as like a tracking system, essentially.
Exactly. Damn. And it's so funny because he was like, all right, well, yeah, this sounds good. And we're like, yeah, this is already built, and let's talk specifics. Let's do a call in 2 weeks and figure out kind of where we go from there. And the call, and I look over to Justin, and I'm like, how quickly can we build this?
Yeah. Let's go.
Because I mean, while some of the technology was still the same, we had to do a lot of modifications. Anyways, we meet the deadline. We built out a separate app that essentially was a Fetii app, but without booking. So it was just kind of the check-in. Demoed it. They loved it. Signed a contract with them. And that's how we were saved.
Dude, what an awesome story. I mean, that's such a great example and lesson of, just how you need to pivot to survive. It's just like, and if you're not willing and able to do that, you're going to sink. Yeah.
You're going to run into so many issues. And I promise you, to anyone listening, there's always some sort of solution. It's a thing where it's probably failure. 80% of failure is just quitting. Right? If you're nonstop thinking about a problem, at some point you're going to come with some sort of solution. And I think that leads to a lot of success, and is one big reason why we were able to come out of what should have been a company killer, right? So anyways, that got us through things. COVID started easing up, and at that point we were like, hey, this is an interesting product that we have, but we still believe much more in what we had pre-COVID. And so we pivoted back, went full force back on the rideshare, and here we are now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And there's so many great examples. I mean, like Netflix, right? I'm sure you're familiar with the origin story of Netflix, right? For everyone listening, like they used to send out DVDs, and people laughed in their face and said, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then one day they're probably sitting in a room thinking the same thing. Fuck, how do we save this thing? Well, let's put them online. Yeah. Changes everything, right? So, yeah, I think a lot of people, maybe it's an ego thing, or maybe people think you know, giving up on an idea, like it really hurts their feelings or whatever. But sometimes you need to pivot in your business and completely change course in order to succeed. And that's what business is. Like, just because you started a clothing brand or a rideshare app doesn't mean that you can't do something else to service your customer, provide value, and grow the business. So yeah, great example. I'm curious how do you look at profit versus growth? How long did it take to get profitable?
Yeah, probably took us, we go by market,
Yeah.
right? You want to become profitable in one market, and then once you reach profitability in that market, you can reinvest, burn in a second market, and then reach profitability, and then rinse and repeat. Um, when it comes to profitability, looking in hindsight, we valued it so much, frankly, because that's where we needed our money to come from. Right? You run into a lot of these issues where companies very easily will be able to raise money. They'll raise millions of dollars. And because they've never had to figure out efficient ways to grow, whether that's on the marketing go-to-market side or anything from overhiring, these different things, they end up burning a lot of cash and getting into a situation where they have to raise even more because they're going to go out of business, or they go out of business. So I'm a big fan of profitability. I could just be saying that because that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'd rather have money coming in from our product and revenue than from investors and
Nice.
having to float. So I'm a big fan of profitability. And I think just there, I forget who said it, but there was like a quote from somebody who had a lot of success. They said a big part of success in kind of the startup world is being able to outlast everyone.
Yeah.
You know, because come 5 or 10 years down the road, the ones who built the business correctly are the ones who are going to have success. And you see that now with a lot of companies with M&A activity kind of going down when interest rates were really high and it was much harder to raise or get lending facilities. You saw a lot of those companies go out of business because frankly, they couldn't afford to not be able to get those credit lines or different things like that. So I think you have a much stronger chance to outlast everyone if you focus on that profitability side. Yeah.
On that note, though, in terms of market landscape, I have two questions. Number one, do you feel like right now is a great time to start a business? Is it more difficult than usual? Or is it easier than ever?
I mean, look, we started a business right before COVID.
Yeah.
I think it's a great time to start a business. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like the right person who has the right mindset probably wouldn't even ask that question.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, this is what I have to do. So whether it's the right time or wrong time, I'm going to give it my shot. And you know, economic activity always ebbs and flows. You go in bull runs, you go in bear runs. So if you can outlast everyone, you're gonna get enough bull runs to where your business can grow, and hopefully kind of weather the storm on those bear runs. So I
downturns
think,
also create massive opportunity.
That's another thing too. So for example, whenever COVID came around, and even after COVID, 1 or 2 years after COVID, do you think a lot of people could go out and start a group transportation company and raise money for that? It's extremely difficult. So if you're able to kind of weather the storm, you create that moat around your business that allows you to have just even more control and even more market lead on other people and other competitors. So I think that's a big thing of being able to weather those bear runs. It creates a lot of power and momentum behind you.
Yeah, and it shows who's going to stick. It's interesting because, you know, one of the questions that a lot of both investors and just curious people have been asking me is like, what are you going to do if TikTok Shop goes down? And my response has been like, I kind of hope it does. Because sure, it might be a little more difficult in the short run, right? Thankfully, we're not too big on TikTok Shop, at least as we used to be, in terms of a sales channel. But the way I look at it is like, it's going to really shake up the market. I think the waters have been so still for quite a while, at least in my industry. The waters have been so calm, so still, that just about anybody has been able to build a little boat and go out there and fish. And because of it, what's happening? The market is saturated. There's not enough fish for everybody. It's a little tougher. If the waters get rough, a lot of those ships are going to sink because they're not built for it. Maybe they're relying on subsidies or relying on a ton of a ton of exposure from these new social platforms. So if the waters get rough, it might be more difficult right away. But if you can, once again, survive that, it can be great for your business. And then you get all of that opportunity that's now opened up.
How would you, where does most of your business come from, would you say?
I'm not sure the exact number, but 90% these days is Shopify direct to store. Okay. Little story for you.
Yeah.
My business used to be 50% Shopify, 50% TikTok Shop. I was pure organic sales on TikTok Shop, pure profit. No ads, no cost of acquisition, nothing. TikTok reps reached out to me, said, hey, you guys should run ads, right? You guys kill it on organic. You should run ads. You know, what's done is done, but it pretty much killed our organic overnight.
Really?
To put it into perspective, like business is going really, really well. Let's say I own a pizza shop. Pizza shop is, firing tons of customers. So I get a little risky. I take a little bit of risk. I open another pizza shop on the other side of town. I buy all of the inventory, all the dough for an entire year, expecting this much in sales. And then a couple of weeks later, homeless guy comes, takes a shit right in front of the pizza shop, right as an inspector happens to be driving by. Boom, pizza shop gets shut down. So in an instant, half of our sales disappeared.
Yeah.
I had just scaled the team up. I had just purchased a ton of inventory with debt. All those bills are now due in a couple months. And it was really tough. I don't even pay myself today. I'm very fortunate to where
I didn't pay myself for a while. I
didn't pay myself for a long time, and I'm fortunate today where I don't have to because I make money from other stuff. But didn't pay myself. I actually put my own money back in. My co-founder didn't pay himself. We only had to let off one person who was a very new and recent employee, which I'm very proud of that we didn't have to kick people off. But it was tough for a while. And guess what though? Now our business is 90% direct to store. Our cost of acquisition has never been lower. Our ROAS has never been higher. So we're killing it direct to store. We're profitable on the first conversion. And if TikTok Shop actually does get banned, which no one's talking about anymore because it's not big news, but that deadline is literally in less than 30 days now. And I spoke with someone who used to have been very high up at TikTok. They recently left to do their own startup. They are very convinced that it's going to be gone for good.
Really?
Yeah, very convinced. We were at coffee with them, me and my videographer, and he was like, yeah, it's cooked. He goes, it's gone in less than 30 days because it's no longer big news, and Trump wants to be a part of big news, right? He wants to have the attention on him. And so if TikTok does indeed get banned, I think it's going to be great for our business. And it's just a great example of, I'm a big fan of the story of the Chinese farmer. You ever heard that story?
Yeah, I have.
I try and live my life by that because you never know whether it's a personal thing or a business thing or professional thing. Something that happens to you right now that might seem like the worst news ever, the TikTok shop shit, literally was the best thing that could have happened to us in the long run because it made our business much stronger and more prepared for what was ultimately going to come, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, do you want to go through the Chinese farmer story for those who don't know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me?
Sure. All right. So there's a Chinese farmer and he's got a son. Anyways, conscription officers, I'm going to start this over. And correct me if I'm wrong. Chinese farmer, he's got a horse.
Yeah.
The horse goes away, or the horse runs off, and the people around the village come and say, oh my gosh, like this is so unfortunate. I'm so sorry for you.
They're our only horse. They're poor.
Yeah, their only horse. The Chinese farmer says, well, I'm not sure. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. A week later, that horse comes back with another horse that it had found. Yeah. And now they have two horses that obviously it's great.
They're rich.
It's great
Back
news.
then they're rich.
The village comes around and says, wow, this is great news. Congratulations. He says, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The son needs to break in the horse, right? It's a wild horse. He's working on the horse. The horse bucks him off. He breaks his leg. The village comes around and says, oh my gosh, this is horrible news. Chinese farmer says, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Conscription officers come back or come through to the village and say, hey, we've got to draft, able-bodied people for a war that's going on. They come to the Chinese farmer and they say, oh, well, your son has a broken leg. We're not going to be able to take him into the war. Village comes around. Wow, this is great news. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The basis of the story is that you never know what's good, what's bad. You kind of just have to keep moving forward and go through with the ups and downs. And so that's exactly kind of a big, I love that story because people will say, oh, well, is this great news? Or even talk about like regret. Like, oh, do you wish this would have happened versus what actually happened? It's like, who knows? I could be in a totally different scenario if something that you would have thought good happened in the past, and it would have changed the whole trajectory of where we are now.
And it literally applies to everything in life. It's not just business. It's like, you know, if some girl or guy you're dating
Exactly.
who you think is the love of your life, like if you lose them, of course, like it's, you know, very normal to be heartbroken and upset, but like the odds are, like, you know, majority of people go on to get married and have kids. Odds are that you're going to meet someone who is better, at least better for you, have beautiful kids with them. And years later, you're going to think, wow, imagine, like, thank God that didn't work out because the best thing to ever happen to me was right around the corner.
Yeah. So like whenever, you know, if you had people saying, hey, what would you do with TikTok shop if TikTok went down, it's my whole question. And when investors would ask us these types of questions, hypotheticals.
What can you do?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, look, when that hurdle or obstacle comes, I don't know what we'll do to figure it out. All I know is that we're going to work on it so hard that we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that is a valuable lesson. And look, now with not having to rely on TikTok and more of that Shopify direct to consumer, you're building up your brand more and you have more control.
I get the emails, I get the data, higher AOV. I mean, it literally was like the best thing to ever happen. Or not.
Yeah.
Who
exactly.
knows? Who knows? Maybe not, dude.
Exactly.
You know, we're at about an hour here, so I want to ask a few final questions for you. You know, what do you think? You're the CEO, correct?
Yeah.
What do you think your superpower is? Like, what has enabled you to be the guy to steer the ship?
I would say the obsession I have, where the whole team knows that no matter what, I'm going to be so dedicated and so focused that we're going to figure out a route to success. I think you have to have so much obsession, and that's why that's kind of why I reference it's I don't fight the urge saying, geez, we have so many things we need to figure out. I'm not going to be able to go out on the weekend. Right? That's something that, because if I were to go out on the weekend, I wouldn't enjoy myself because I've got so many things I need to figure out. Right? So I think having that obsession and dedication, and it's a huge superpower to be able to overcome a lot of these different obstacles. That and learning. I'm just constantly learning, listening to podcasts like yours, reading, meeting with people, just trying to figure out how I can get to where I want to get. So I think constantly learning and obsession is probably the two biggest superpowers, which is something that anybody can have, right? You know, I'm not saying, oh, I'm a super genius that can do, you know, I'm a human calculator and a lot of people can't do that. And so that's what, I mean, it's just pure dedication and constant learning.
Yeah. And having I don't want to, selflessness isn't the right word, having the humility to always kind of be admitting to yourself that I really don't know anything.
Exactly.
Right? Even though you're far beyond most other people your age.
Exactly. No, that's a good point you bring in. And I get a lot of scenarios where even some of my team members will be like, wait, you told us like we should do this 3 weeks ago, and now you're saying we should do something else this week. And it's like, look, I'm not trying to go back and forth, but in that amount of time, you wouldn't believe how much I've learned.
Yeah.
And that has impacted or affected the decision making.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm the first one to say, hey, look, I get it sounds like I'm going back and forth, but what I said previously, I was wrong.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't know what I know now. So definitely having that humility and to your point, like, I mean, it's you have to be able to sort through information, and what your job is to make the right decision. It's not to know everything. It's not to be right on the first try. It's not to be smarter than the guy you're getting advice from. It's to take in all these variables, all these inputs, and with all the information that you have, then you can make a decision.
Yeah.
You know,
I like that. I'm curious what your on that note, your team building or hiring process is like. Every founder has usually a different one. Some have the same, but how do you go about hiring people, and how do you structure your business in terms of bringing on top level talent?
Look, with everyone on the team.
How many employees do you have, by the way?
Yeah, so we've got 8 in the US full time. This isn't including all of our driver partners and everything, our ambassadors and everything like that. Then we've got 6 in India. They help with the software development. We've got 1 in Portugal, who we just recently brought on, who is a very talented back-end architect. And we've got 3 in the Philippines who help us a lot with customer support and some inbound sales and editor. We've got an editor offshore. But when bringing people on, especially that core team, you really want people who have that entrepreneurial itch in them.
Entrepreneurs, some would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you heard that term before?
No, I haven't.
Entrepreneur, it's like someone who has the entrepreneurial drive, wants to take risks, wants to try things, but doesn't necessarily want to be the guy, right? The guy in front of the camera, the main dude. So it's like, a type of individual who thrives having freedom to make decisions on their own, but has a little bit of guidance from a superior.
Yeah, that is a good term for the type of people that we look to bring on. It's somebody who has an itch to build, doesn't need to be micromanaged, right? We recently brought on Tim Hofacker, who's kind of leading our Fetii media initiative. Tim. You know Tim?
Dude, yeah, because we talked back when he was with the boys.
Yeah, boys in 98. Yeah. He was their
small world
videographer. And so we were looking for someone to build out this Fetii media initiative that we have going on. Real quick, Fetii Media is kind of this content arm that we're building out that allows us to essentially grow the Fetii brand nationally much quicker, even in markets where the rideshare product isn't available yet.
Which is great, but you guys are killing it with that. I just want to give you props.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. And a big part of that has been Tim. And so when I reached out to him, I kind of explained to him what we're building. And very quickly, he's like, okay, this is something that I want to build. This is something that I know I'll be able to have a lot of impact in. I'll have free reins, I'll have visionary control, all this different thing. And you want someone who has that kind of drive and has that motive behind them. And so it's really kind of a journey of finding people who want to join your rocket ship, right? And it's tough to find those people. And fortunately, with the internet today, it's made it a lot easier. I mean, so with Tim, it started off with a DM, and
he DM'd you, or you DM'd him?
So I saw some of the one of our team members showed me a Boys of 98 YouTube video, and I said, "Oh, this is interesting. This is kind of something similar that we want to do. We have a really great brand among college students, and we want to, with this Fetii media arm, we wanted to kind of create content that showcased them. And Boys of 98 were doing a good job of that. And so I reached out to them and I said, hey, I'm looking for somebody to kind of fill this role. Do you have anybody in mind? And they said, yeah, I think I know a guy who used to work for us, Tim. And so they sent him my contact. We got connected. We had like a 3-hour phone call of me explaining what I was trying to do. He lived in Orlando at the time. I really did believe that he had what it took to really grow this thing, and be a big part of it. And so I flew out to Orlando. I met with him and his dad at the time, kind of explained what we were doing. And probably 2 weeks later, he moved to Austin.
That's cool. And I feel like that's unique that you went out to him. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think there was any bit of a gut feeling? And do you think it's a resume thing, or sometimes you just have a gut feeling? You're just like, I think this guy's going to be a star.
I think it's a gut feeling.
Yeah,
I think,
agree.
Quickly you can figure out if someone has it or not. And then likewise, very quickly you can find out if you were right or wrong.
Yeah.
Especially in a startup. And I tell the whole team this, whether it's marketing, whether it's driver operations, whether it's the tech, the product, in a small startup, you're going to very quickly find out if someone's not pulling their weight or doing what they need to do. Because if you take a week off and you're not doing much, let's say in our business with marketing, who else is working on marketing?
Yeah.
No one. So now all of a sudden you go a whole week and hey, nothing's being done. What's going on here? Versus at a big company like Google or Facebook, if one person takes a week off, nothing really changes.
For sure.
For the most part. So I think really quickly in a startup, you can find out if someone's doing what they need to do or not. So that makes it easy too. But yeah, I would say a big part is gut feeling. How many people do you have on your team?
Oh, I don't know. Everyone, technically they'd be like freelancers, but I call them specialists because everyone on our team is really good at one thing and they do it for a lot of other big brands. And our goal at the end of the raise is to bring everyone on. And I've talked to everyone. They work like, I don't want to call anybody out, but a lot of the guys on our team work for like some other killer companies and they work for us and probably get paid less than they should, as we all do, because they really like the idea of the company and what it's trying to do. Beyond, it's not to be for me. I don't even give a shit about clothes, to be honest. Like I want to bring young, ambitious guys together. I want to create a very similar story to what Chip did with Lulu for young boss girls in the early 2000s. So they, a lot of guys want to buy into that. But I think total, we have like 7 or 8. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, not including our athletes. We have like 100 athletes.
Nice.
But yeah, employees itself. Like
and I think you touched on it is. If a big key kind of factor and kind of tell sign is if they're willing to take a pay cut, or if they're willing to, for example, whenever I brought Tim on and a lot of the team, I say, hey, we could do this salary with this amount of equity, or we could do a lower salary with higher equity.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a test in my eyes. It's like, hey, if you chose the higher equity and lower salary, then you're in it for the right reasons.
For sure.
And
I fully agree.
So yeah, that's finding the right people, the right team is so crucial. And you have to be able to inspire people. You have to be able to make people trust you and be confident that you know what you're doing. And if you can do that, if you can build a really good team around you, it makes things so much easier.
For sure. And it is about, there's no big CEO or founder who's done it by himself. You need the team. And I think that's a great lesson that everyone listening or watching can take to offer, not just to don't give someone a paycheck offer, give them the opportunity to pick, right?
Well, that's because, that's all, that the whole team, that's what we're working towards.
Yeah.
And I tell them, look, we're all working towards this upside versus just taking a salary. They all take salary, but just trying to get short-term money in. We're all trying to work towards this. And so it's, if you've got kind of a stake in the game, it makes everyone just that much more motivated and inspired to build something properly versus just, hey, I'm getting in my salary and there's no reason for me to grind on the weekends or the evenings because what's in it for me?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that is a big thing whenever you're building out that team, is making sure people get a piece of the pie.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Final question for you. Is there a belief or like a testament you live by that you think most people would disagree with?
I think it's that thing about living in the future, and I see the pros and cons of it. A lot of people say, hey, you need to live in the present, because if you're not enjoying the present and you're always changing the future, you get to the end of your life and did you really enjoy it? I think that's probably something that's a little bit controversial where, and look, we'll see at the end of this all if that was the right call.
Yeah.
But I think one thing for me is always live towards a vision you have in your head, and keep chasing it. And I think that will make your life a lot more interesting. It makes the journey a lot more fun, especially looking back at it and all the things you've created. Because look, if we take a step back, we've got over 200 drivers on the platform. A lot of these drivers, Fetii is a significant, if not majority, part of their income. We're doing, the whole team being able to do what we've done. We've impacted a lot of lives. So not just on the driver side, but over 1 million passengers to date. Last year we transported 1.5 million passengers. And I tell the team, like, the memories we're creating, we're helping facilitate, the drinking and driving we're removing.
Yes.
Like with those numbers, I don't want to get into hypotheticals, but I'd imagine
probably save some lives.
I'd imagine, and it's hard to put a number on that, but I tell the team, like, we're doing a lot of good. And it's good to take a step back and say, hey, well, we're taking some sacrifices, or we're not, doing this or that, but we're creating a lot of big impact. And I think, living in the environment we're in, being in the United States, we've got a lot of a lot of just positive things that have been given to us. We might as well take the most out of it, and give it a shot. Whether that's building a business, whether whatever it is. Both my parents were immigrants, and they came to the U.S. for that type of opportunity. And I think it for a lot of people who are maybe second, third, fourth, fifth, go on generation. I think traveling can be a good thing because you go to these other countries and you become a little bit more grateful. And it's like, hey, we're in this really unique opportunity where a lot of people want to come here. Might as well take advantage and swing for the fences where other people may not have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And to your point about looking forward, sharks swim forward, right? They don't stop, and they never stop. And I think it's all about the story. And at the end of the day, we are animals. And I think from a literal sense, like, animals always move forward, right?
Yeah.
They're always migrating. They're always going somewhere new. I think we should look that way at our lives as well. But dude, thank you so much for coming on. This has been
Thanks
great.
for having me. No, I'm a big fan, and we'll do it again.
Hell yeah, bro. Thank you.
All right.